rock with me for a second. Now imagine you're a photographer in the year 2009 and you're trying to be a better sports photographer, trying to be a better action and sports photographer. Now you walk up with your meager means camera because you don't have the money to afford the biggest, latest, baddest camera, but you can afford something decent. And you're walking around and you're noticing all these guys with the biggest, baddest cameras that can shoot 8, 9, 10 frames a second, and you're sitting there with a camera that shoots 4 frames a second, and you're doing sports. Now let's be real. If you're doing sports, you're studying how to do sports. You're trying your best to be the best photographer you can be. There's a limit to how many frames you can do per second. Even if you're at the right place in the right time, sometimes technology can be the hindrance to you getting a great picture. So what do? You're gonna have to upgrade at some point in time. Well, at the time, most of the camera companies were shooting for cameras that had 4 frames a second, 5 frames a second. And even though that's good, if you're trucking a lot of megapixels, you don't have a lot of buffer. That means you're not going to be able to sustain that read and write speed for a long time before the camera stops working and activating the shutter so you can take pictures. Now you might think, oh, well, Devin, this is in 2009. You have a lot of cameras to choose from at a lot of different prices. Well, what you don't know is camera companies like Canon and Nikon at the time did not have a full-fledged lineup of cameras, especially Canon. And the older ones were so long in the tooth when they came out that there was no big upgrade from camera to camera. Until this camera came out, the Canon 7D Mark I. Now, as a sports photographer, a lot of times you're reliant on the technology that you have. So if you're sitting there with a camera with an SD card running the slowest speeds, you will miss out on a lot of different opportunities. Now, I'm not talking about the lowest level photographer. I'm talking about the people who are competing, getting the Olympics, getting some of the best images that you see on magazines and stuff like that. That's where I was shooting for in 2009. The faster the camera, the more moments it can capture, the better chance you have of capturing the shot. Here comes the 7D Mark I, Canon's intermediate camera that was under $2,000. So now we're gonna take this camera out, put it through its paces, and see if a camera that came out in 2009 is still worth it in 2023. I took it out on the track and just got a casual track practice of, you know, the ladies running across the track here. And I compared some of the images. Now, I used a 50mm plastic fantastic. This was a cheap option. A lot of people, when they're first starting out in photography, they have a cheap option like the 50mm plastic fantastic. And then my pro option for the people who can afford it would be the 300mm 2.8. Now, telephoto lenses, white lenses, so to speak, when you see them on the basketball floor, you will see them on the football field, the 100 to 400 to 400mm primes, the 500mm primes, and wildlife, things of that nature, Olympics. You use these lenses for pros. So as the runners are getting ready, we got this in back button autofocus mode with a 300mm 2.8 on it. The reason why we have it in back button autofocus mode is because we want to get the best tracking abilities out of the camera, and the best way to do it is to put it in back button focus mode. If you don't know what back button focus mode is, it's basically taking the autofocus and putting it on the button here. And then once you put it on the button back here for autofocusing only, you'll release the shutter here. So when you go on your menu system, this only releases the shutter and this only does the autofocusing. All right, so now you know my in-field experience with the 7D Mark I. Now I want to tell you guys the pros and the cons. Let's get to the nitty gritty. Yeah, I'm a little bit biased and I love this camera when I used to use it, but now I use a different camera. And I can speak from a less biased perspective, but you do what's best for you at the end of the day. Don't do stuff just based off what I say. All right, let's start with the pros. All right, now the autofocus system is above any smartphone system that you would get. The ability to use back button focus on this camera is paramount. I can't stress enough how much back button focus is way better than any cell phone because of the ergonomics in combination with the back button focus. Being able to separate your focus from the shutter is amazing because you can use faster lenses, not only use faster lenses, but have more or have better accurate autofocus with these faster pieces of glass. The ability to actually separate and control the camera from an autofocus perspective, having a dual processor in it. Now, think about it, a dual processor. Not many cameras today even have a dual processor. Even though their single processor is good enough and technology has gotten great, a lot of cameras don't even have dual processors. You'd have to buy a flagship camera to get a dual processor that matches with these times. That's how much more memory the 7D is doing better than the average cell phone camera. So if you're doing sports, I would rather have the 7D over a cell phone camera for the autofocus capabilities and the back button focus capabilities. Now it's a DSLR. This is the second pro. It's a DSLR. It works way better with a telephoto lens than any other camera that is not a DSLR. DSLRs and mirrorless cameras work way better than telephoto lenses than a cell phone would, than a point and shoot camera would, because the point and shoot cameras are built in with their telephoto lenses and you have no control over taking them off for most point and shoot. And cell phones are essentially point and shoot cameras as well. They just have more lenses, but that doesn't mean that they're using their lenses to the highest level, so to speak. But on cell phones, typically you're using software to compensate for some kind of, I want to say, physics issue that you won't be able to fix any other kind of way. This next pro is the fact that it's a DSLR. It is designed, like I said in the last bullet point, it is designed to get the best out of any situation. And even if your camera or your lens or your sensor is not strong enough, there are certain things that you can do to make your camera lens combination strong enough and get better image quality without having to break the bank sometimes. Sometimes it's not about getting the greatest lens. Sometimes it's about putting your camera on a tripod and shooting at slower shutter speeds or shooting at lower ISO values. Sometimes it's about adding flashes and going into bulb mode or going into different modes that your cell phone won't let you have. And even if you do have a pro mode on a Samsung Galaxy S22 or an iPhone or whatever, and you may actually have ProRes, how much control over that do you actually have? And that's one of the reasons why DSLRs are so useful and people still have them. People are still actually buying DSLRs. Now, it's not as in high demand as it used to be, but DSLRs are now going down in price and people want to know, hey, this is like 10 times less than my cell phone price, my cell phone payment. What can this camera offer me that my cell phone can't? Because I'm paying $1,000 for a cell phone. Why can't I buy a $250 7D Mark I? Why can't I buy a $200, $300, $400 7D Mark I or a 7D Mark II for $400, $500 if I really like photography and I really wanted to see my pictures look better? Maybe I'm taking pictures of my kid and they're doing little league or big league sports and they're inside of a gym and they want to get better low light ability. Now with this camera, you might need to get a faster lens with the 7D Mark I, but you get what I'm saying. It's built to take all of that stuff. It's built to go the distance. Have you ever thought that maybe you've been buying cell phones every other year and it's costing way more money than a camera that you may just have for years and years and years? It saves you so much more money to have a camera for at least 5, 10, maybe even a lifetime of years than to keep buying cell phones to see its latest and greatest software. Ergonomics and build quality. Ergonomics and build quality go in line with the fact that it's a DSLR. Ergonomically, you can actually put your fingers on it and go to certain places at certain times without even having to bring your camera off of your face. You can keep focusing on what's in front of you instead of looking down at your phone, trying to swipe up if somebody's texting you, worrying about how much memory you have on your phone, and then having to go back and do all these clicks. The fact that the shutter button is on the front of your camera keeps you taking pictures. It's designed for one thing and one thing only: taking pictures. And a lot of people are like, oh, it's just a picture. Well, a lot of people love pictures, even though people don't like to pay for pictures as much because everybody can take pictures. Pictures are still important, and they're extremely important. As a matter of fact, pictures have skyrocketed in value for LinkedIn and all these other things. You gotta have some kind of a media presence now with almost any profession. So with that being said, having a Canon 7D Mark I for its ergonomics, having everything on your hands, being able to use your thumb to go over, having that thumb wheel, that scrolly dial, having a drive mode on here, all of these things, when you put this in your hands, it's going to feel like it was designed for taking pictures. And then the build quality. I've seen somebody set the 7D on fire and keep using it. Shout out to Kai from Digital Rev. He used to work at Digital Rev a long time ago. And back in the early 2000s, he set the 7D on Mark fire along with Locke. It was Kai and Locke, I remember them. But back in the early 2000s, they set the 7D Mark fire, they ran it over, they froze it, shot it with a pellet gun, and it still kept working. How many cell phones can do that? How many times have you told somebody to hold your cell phone and take a picture, and what if somebody takes your cell phone? Or how many times have you dropped your cell phone, you cracked the screen, and you still... Cell phones were not designed to take the rigors of taking pictures. And you might be thinking, oh, taking pictures, you don't get any rigorous situations. For people who don't know about photography and how expensive and how sensitive lenses can be, you don't know that build quality is extremely important. You know that sound that the cell phone makes when you drop it in it and you're like, oh, I hope that screen ain't broken. I hope that screen ain't broken. You know that feeling that I'm talking about. All right, and these are 3 pros for the video side. Now, unfortunately, the 7D Mark I doesn't have that many pros on the video side, but you have the ability to manually control your video. You have the ability to use it as a crash cam. Like I said, it has dual processors and it's a beast with build quality. People set it on fire, shot it with pellet guns and stuff like that. It can process a lot of memory, but it also can be used as a crash cam. So say for example, you're trying to do some stuff on your fancy stuff on some kind of moving truck or something like that, and you're trying to film a car or something like that. Well, use the 7D Mark I because it can be used as a great crash cam, and you can put fast glass on it. All right, so let's get into the unfortunate part, the cons. Now, first off, it's big, it's bulky, it's hulky. Now, if you like having big cameras in your hands, like I got big hands, so having a big camera grip in my hand, it's easy and it feels comfortable for me, especially if I have a big lens on there. If I'm using that 300mm, it was so easy using that 300mm with that camera because all the focus points are kind of, concentrated in the center, and you get tunnel vision. So a lot of the subject is brought forward in your image, and you're able to focus on some part of the subject as it's coming towards you, like in that track example that I was given. But you got to understand that it is big and hulky. So if you don't want that big camera there, then you might not want to be buying this. Also, it runs CF cards. CF cards have advanced in the subsequent years and the years after this camera came out. Those years, we've gotten CF Express cards, CF Express Type A, CF Express Type B, and I use CF Express Type B cards, and let me tell you, I love those cards. They're extremely fast, and they work so well with 4K and even 8K video. Well, the 7D Mark I didn't have that technology out at the time, and it ran the original CF card. Now, this original CF card is still being sold. You can find it on Amazon, not too hard, but you also have to get a CF card reader, and you may have to get a USB cable to get your stuff off. Now, if you don't mind that, that's fine, because the CF card is extremely durable, but you would have to find a format, which is the CF card, the first version, that a lot of people don't actually have or have access to. So if you're trying to give your CF card off to somebody who is maybe your boss or something like that, and you work for a photography company, or you're trying to give it to a friend, well, they're not going to have any CF card readers on them. Typically, most people do not have CF card readers, so you would have to bear that little brunt on your own. But if you don't have anything to do with that, you're just buying this for yourself and you're the only person that's going to be managing the card, well, then there's no issue. Also, another hindrance is its dynamic range and image quality. Now, it's an 18 megapixel sensor, but Canon made like 4,000 versions of this sensor in different models, and it really wasn't different. It was okay, so that 18 megapixel sensor from Canon was just rehashed in so many different cameras. The T2i, the T3i, the T4i, the SL1, I think. There's a whole bunch of cameras that came out with the same image quality. They didn't improve the image quality or dynamic range of their images. Also, they didn't increase the megapixel count. So you're going to be having a longer than 2 sensor when it came out. When the 70 came out in 2009, that sensor was old and longer than 2. Canon just kept rehashing it. I don't understand why they kept doing it. I guess it was to sell more lower, costing cameras. I guess maybe it was a sensor issue thing, but Canon makes their own sensors. I don't understand why they couldn't make a slightly different sensor for this camera. And this, the 7D Mark II actually did have a big leap in image quality in 2014, but when I rented it, so image quality, watch out. You want to make sure you put some light at this camera and bring some image. You want to flood this camera with light. You want to increase the image quality with the lens, all these other things. So do that. Also, there's no autofocus in video. There's only contrast detection in video, and that's kind of bad because most people are used to filming themselves like they're looking at the camera like I am right now with nobody behind the camera. Well, you have to understand that you're going to have to manually focus. Now, if you're a student of the game and you don't care about manual focus, you can actually do it and you don't mind doing it. You're able to focus trap yourself and use different little techniques to make sure that you're in focus like most people do who are trying to get good at this, then that's no problem. But it does have a video function. You can do manual video and all this stuff, but you won't be able to focus it. And that's the difference between keeping a shot and not keeping a shot. So you would have to cut it off, hit the contrast, autofocus on, and get all of that stuff done. But at the end of the day, guys, that's pretty much it on the pros and cons list. Understand that the 7D Mark I was one of the best cameras that ever came out for its time. Yes, it had really good competition in the D500 on the Nikon side, but having a camera that had a dual processor, think about that, dual processor in a sub $2,000 camera was unheard of. Even to this day, like I said, most cameras, even with the latest technology, don't have dual processors. Right now, the only one I can think about from the Canon side is the R3, and that's $6,500. And a lot of people are not trying to spend that much money. So pick and choose your poisons. An older dual processor or a new camera that may or may not even have dual processors, it is what it is. If you're trying to save money, you're trying to go that route, $300, $200, get a 7D Mark I. It is an amazing camera. I'm done with Century FX Studios. What do you guys think? 2023, a Canon 7D Mark I. I know it's blowing everybody's mind because everybody's used to buying a cell phone that has 3 different cameras on it or 3 different camera lenses on it. The latest and greatest, right? No. Try that 7D Mark I. Try one of those old cameras that were really good for its time. You might be surprised. Stay tuned for the next video.